Ryan Aber from newsok.com and the Oklahoman here for a Heisman discussion with Ohio State beat writer for the Columbus Dispatch, Bill Rabinowitz, and Austin American-Statesman, Suzanne Halliburton. Suzanne and Bill, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
We're here to discuss the Heisman Trophy and the three finalists, Kyler Murray from Oklahoma, Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama, and Ohio State's Dwayne Haskins, all quarterbacks. Let's start with you, Bill. An interesting year for Dwayne Haskins. His numbers are absolutely off the charts, but really his Heisman candidacy didn't take off until the last few weeks.
You're right. It started off pretty strong, actually, but he was a first-year starter. People didn't really know what to make of him. He's a different kind of quarterback than Ohio State's had. They've had J.T. Barrett, who's definitely a dual threat, as much a runner as passer. Braxton Miller before him. And Dwayne Haskins is definitely more of a pro-style quarterback, and there was a question about how he would fit in Urban Meyer's spread offense because that requires quarterbacks to run, and that's not really what Dwayne Haskins does very well. But then he settled in very quickly. He has great receivers around him, a veteran receiver core, and lit it up early. Went through a little bit of a swoon midseason as they tried to get the running game fixed, and then finished with a bang against, especially against Michigan and Northwestern.
What's been the biggest key for him in getting that turned around, and what did he do better there at the end of the season, especially obviously that Michigan game and the Big Ten championship game, that those two stand out for what he was able to do? What was the difference there than maybe earlier in the season or that midseason swoon like you mentioned?
Yeah, it's funny. Part of it was he started to run a little bit. Now, he's never going to be Braxton Miller or J.T. Barrett, but you need that dimension. You need the threat of it, if only to kind of have your teammates, I don't say respect you, that's overstating it, but to add that dimension where they know, okay, this guy is willing to stick his nose in there and get those tough yards, but also opens up the defense. It forces them to play them more honestly, because it got to a point where if they ever ran an option, they wouldn't even bother to try to tackle Haskins. They would just go right for the running back. And so they needed to be able to have that dimension to at least keep defenses honest. But he also just throws a terrific ball. I mean, he just flings it like a video game sometimes. He can make the out throw, the out pattern, like nobody I've ever seen at Ohio State before. And again, he has great receivers, and his line protected him very well for the most part. The run blocking was a little shaky, but the pass blocking was very good. And if you give Dwayne Haskins time to sit in the pocket and pick you apart, he will.
Suzanne, I'm curious about your thoughts about Dwayne Haskins specifically. What you've seen from him sort of following from afar?
Well, I actually saw him, covered him, TCU Ohio State in Arlington, AT&T Stadium back in mid-September. I was really impressed because at the time I thought TCU had the best secondary, or one of the best secondaries in the Big 12. He threw for 344 yards and 2 touchdowns. They won 40-28, but their defense scored 2 touchdowns for him. But I thought, hey, this is a pretty good guy. He played a lot older than he actually was, but I was impressed with him.
And then next up, we'll talk about Oklahoma's Kyler Murray, obviously a guy that I'm very familiar with, covering the Sooners day to day. And Kyler Murray, I don't think anybody expected him to have near this kind of season. We all expected that Baker Mayfield, there would be a drop-off after Baker Mayfield left at the quarterback spot, but that hadn't been the case at all. They've been better offensively with Kyler Murray there because of his running ability. Bill, you talked about Dwayne Haskins not really being able to run. That's certainly never a consideration with Kyler Murray. But not only his ability to run to free up space for him to make throws downfield. He's a guy who's really always looking to make the throw if he can. There's been a couple times. There was one in the Iowa State game that really stands out. I actually saw a video earlier, somebody pointing it out. He had a pretty clear lane to run to his right and score a touchdown, but decided to throw instead, make the easier play there for Kyler Murray. That, to me, has been the most impressive thing about what he's done. Bill, you got a chance to see Oklahoma's offense live last year when Oklahoma came up to Columbus and played that great game at Ohio State. I would imagine that you were, along with the rest of us, thinking there was no way Oklahoma's offense could be better with Kyler Murray than it was with Baker Mayfield.
You're right, and it wasn't just because of Baker Mayfield. I mean, I knew they lost Orlando Brown. They lost the tight end, Mark Andrews. And so, yeah, I mean, not that I really followed Oklahoma that closely because I knew Ohio State wasn't playing them this year. But you do because you know, okay, who's Ohio State going to be in the competition with for the playoff? You want to see those teams a little bit. And I have a Heisman vote. And I had a pretty good idea before this weekend who I was going to vote for. And that changed everything. And I thought, I take this seriously. I'm going to actually really do my research as best I can. Obviously, there's lots of stuff going on with Ohio State other than the Heisman stuff.
There's something else going on in Columbus this week?
Yeah. So, fortunately, this was before that happened. But I went back and really looked at the stats and looked at how they do against good competition. And then I looked up YouTube and got a highlight video. And I have to tell you, some of the plays that Kyler Murray made were just fantastic. The runs especially, but even the passes, the touch. He hit guys in tight windows. He showed touch. He showed the ability to throw the ball deep. I know he's not that tall, and I know that's going to be an issue with him if he pursues the NFL. But I just was really, really impressed. Now, again, it's a highlight tape, and I try to take it with a bit of a grain of salt because, they don't show the interceptions. But he was very impressive.
And, Suzanne, you got to look at Kyler Murray last weekend at the Big 12 championship game. Bill talks about being able to drop passes into tight windows. But that Grant Calcaterra touchdown catch for me was one of those kind of moments that you think of that a Heisman winner makes. What did you take away from seeing him, not only then, but the other times you've watched Kyler Murray play this season?
Well, I have an interesting, not just this season. I covered Kyler when he was at A&M, Texas A&M. And I remember his first game as a starter, he ran for 155 yards. And I think that was against South Carolina. And he was SEC Freshman of the Week. But he wanted to run. He liked to run. What I was so impressed with, I saw him play against TCU, and also saw him this weekend. And he now, it's like he's got dancing feet. He sits back there and he's so quick. But he wants to throw. He doesn't want to run unless he's got to. But God, he is so fast when he runs. He's beautiful to watch. But yeah, his passing game is just really pretty. And I likened it to some people out in the newsroom that he's basically Johnny Manziel if Johnny's game had matured. And that's what I think Kyler is.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, talking about his days at Texas A&M and the growth that we've seen from him. To me, that mimics the growth that we saw from Baker Mayfield from his freshman year at Texas Tech to Oklahoma. Obviously, part of that is Lincoln Riley and what he's been able to do with those two quarterbacks. But I think also part of it is just the natural maturation of a quarterback who knows they can rely on their feet and sometimes lean on that a little bit too much early in their careers. And both those guys really changed from the time they were at their first place to when they started in Norman. Finally, let's jump in and talk about Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Suzanne, he's a guy who I think a lot of us thought he was just going to run away and hide with this Heisman Trophy race. He's been fantastic all year. The interception numbers, keeping them really low. But what impresses you most about what Tua's been able to do?
He's just been perfect for all season, but that whole team has been perfect. I mean, what was the stat that they've beaten everybody by 20 points for the first time since like 1888 or some, and it's been more than a century since anybody's seen this. And it's just like the sheer perfection. And I think also too, with voters, maybe there's a little bit of a backlash that we wanted something else, but yeah, he never threw interceptions. His team was always ahead. And so, I mean, Alabama's a total team and he was their leader.
And Bill, we talked about all three of these quarterbacks being first-year guys. Tua's situation's a little bit different because he had that national championship game experience coming in relief of Jalen Hurts. But then Saturday, we saw the opposite where Tua got hurt. Jalen Hurts comes in and leads Alabama to an SEC championship game win. What did that game do to alter maybe your perception of what Tua's season has been?
Well, a decent amount. I mean, it doesn't change the fact he's a great player, but it does make you realize it's not just him, that they could go to their backup. And again, Jalen Hurts is not your typical backup. But when you see that Tua really struggled in that game and Jalen Hurts comes off the bench, hadn't played in significant minutes and who knows how long, and led them to victory when they could have lost, and they were down 2 touchdowns. I think that did alter a lot of people's perceptions, including mine. Now, again, still a great quarterback. And I think this year, I've said this on another radio show, that this is a year where all 3 of those guys, and maybe even more, are worthy Heisman winners. There have been years, and I've voted for this for a while, where you're like, I got to vote for that guy, by default almost. I would feel perfectly fine with any of those 3 winning the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Suzanne, do you have a Heisman vote?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm the only one without one here, and that's
wow.
by design, because a couple years ago when they made such a big deal about not releasing votes early,
they tracked us down when they did that.
Yeah, so we don't have a vote, so I can speak sort of freely, but I'll ask this, and Bill, I'll follow up with the same question to you. What do you look at when you're looking at voting for the Heisman Trophy? We've talked a lot with Kyler Murray, especially Kyler versus Tua, and now Dwayne Haskins, about value versus talent versus what the team has around him. What made me the top criteria for you?
That's a great question. It probably changes from year to year. If it's a year where one guy's talent is just head and shoulders above somebody else, that wins the day for me. If it's another year where, I try to avoid the happens to be a quarterback on a great team thing, which has happened. Gino Torretta is kind of a poster boy for that, I guess, way back. It is subjective. I don't think that there is a set criteria, even in individual voters' minds, about what it is. And honestly, this doesn't occupy a ton of my thought until it needs to. I'm not looking all year, who's my Heisman favorite? I wait till the end and say, okay, who is it? And again, like I said, this year it was more challenging because I thought all 3 guys were worthy. I thought Haskins is the guy that was happy to be there. I don't think anyone's expecting him to win. And the other 2, boy, I remember getting Kyler Murray emails from Oklahoma promoting him. First of all, I don't even open any of those. But I remember seeing it maybe 3 weeks ago thinking, yeah, right. Because it was 2-0 seemed like such a shoo-in.
Yeah.
But after last week, and I did watch the Alabama-Georgia game because it mattered for Ohio State, and I thought, this does not help Tua. And then I went and watched Kyler Murray more, and I just was really, really impressed. Again, I'm not saying who I voted for. I'm going to be, on the right side of the Heisman committee, but it did alter the way I did vote. And
just to follow up to that, when did you actually turn in your vote? I know you mentioned you watched the championship games before you did it.
Probably about 2:00 on Monday.
Okay.
Before the deadline.
So you were pushing it on that.
Right.
Suzanne, same thing to you. What is the criteria that you maybe hold in highest regard when deciding who to cast your vote for?
Well, I try not to vote for the obvious one unless it's like really, because in today's society, we get that the social media just landslide, and it's like you can't stop the momentum. I like to take a step back and see what everybody's doing. You like a guy who wins, and you like a guy who's dominant, and you like a guy who's consistent. But sometimes I just don't want to vote for the quarterback, like Bill said, for the quarterback on the best team. You want to take a step back from that. So sometimes my votes do not mirror the guy who won. I voted for Baker last year. I voted for Johnny Manziel in 2012. But I have, chances are I voted for the guy who's come in second or third too. But and you like winners. But you can't just Ricky Williams, in 1998, when he broke the record for the NCAA career rushing record, his team was 9-3. And, they lost. They lost 2 games early, but he deserved the Heisman just because he didn't play for the best team competing for the Big 12 or competing for a national championship. Sometimes we overlook those guys, and I try not to. And if you want to ask me when I turned in my Heisman, yeah. I think it was like 1:00 on Monday, and I was freaking out because I was doing it on my iPad and it wouldn't take my email. And so I'm calling the Heisman people, freaking out, and the guy calls me back, and it's like it's just in my iPad. But yeah, that's what I voted. I voted. I can't say who I voted for because the Heisman committee will track you down 3 months after the fact, but they will find you.
Yes, they will. And I can be a little bit more free because I don't have a Heisman vote, so I don't have to worry about one, turning that in. First of all, kudos to both of you for waiting until after the championship game. I don't think it should even be an option to vote before those championship games. With the way that they do balloting now, you could understand it when you had a paper ballot, not now that it's electronic. But I would vote for Kyler Murray, number one, because of a couple things. The numbers have been fantastic for him this year. And I know I'm going to sound like a homer because I cover Oklahoma, but watching him play day in and day out, this team would not be anywhere close to the college football playoff if it weren't for Kyler Murray performing at the level that he did. I think that fourth quarter against Texas, even though they lost that game in October, that went a long way toward helping them get to the playoff because they were able to come back and tie that game in the fourth quarter. That game at 48-45, you have a much different perception than if it would have been a 21-point victory. He had a lot of other games where he came up huge, including against West Virginia and Texas in the Big 12 championship game, a very strong closing kick. Number two, I'd put Dwayne Haskins because of how he finished the year and the value that he brought to that team. Number three, Tua Tagovailoa. I thought he was absolutely fantastic this year. It comes down to a question over how talented is he versus how talented is this offense and the team around him. Tua is fantastic. There's no denying that. All three of these guys, I think this year, as Bill mentioned, would be worthy winners. But that would be my 1, 2, 3 here if I had a vote. But I don't. So I'll just go to New York this weekend and enjoy it up there and see which one of those three guys comes out the winner. But once again, we're going to wrap that up. Thank you, Suzanne Halliburton from the Austin American-Statesman, Bill Rabinowitz from the Columbus Dispatch. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ryan Aber from the Oklahoman and NewsOK.com.